Sorry about that. We're still working on the music. Hey, good morning, y'all. Good afternoon, whatever it is. Thanks for joining me. If you see, I don't have my banners behind me. We're kind of in transition right now, packing up the house, cleaning the house, getting it ready for a sale, and doing other things. So I'm no longer in the lab. I'm actually like makeshift in my kitchen, if you will. It looks like I'm in the middle of the damn kitchen. I am, kind of, sort of. But that's a whole nother story. I want to thank you guys for watching today's show. I will get into the habit of doing daily podcasts. If you guys aren't familiar with the schedule, I do a daily podcast on particular conferences. So for today, it's going to be the ACC and the American Athletic Conference, but specifically, I'm just going to be talking about their defensive lines on each individual team. Maybe look at some of the marquee players and point them out to you. I'm probably not going to do the deep dive on every single player like I do for the MVPs. If you guys aren't aware, I have a premium content channel on Patreon, on YouTube, where I deep dive every single team in America, and I tell you all about every position group, every coach, everything that's associated with the team and where they're going, and then I give you predictions like how many games they're going to win, are they going to be in the playoffs, are they going to win the conference, things of that nature. So if you ever ask me those questions and I don't answer them, it's because I answer it for the MVPs on Patreon or YouTube. So get the app like Patreon, download it. You can go and become a member of the channel. There's a way to be a free member and just watch all the free content I make on the channel. But I also provide the premium content. That'll be your UFC picks, your football game picks, things of that nature. It is $25 a month or $255 for the year. We do have people sign up for the whole year just to save a little bit of money, or they pay every month $25. Get your picks when you can. No, I don't give daily picks. It's more like weekly. I do Saturday UFC fights. I do every single day for college football. Any game that's on, I'm going to pick them all. But when it comes to like basketball games, baseball games, Rico, I need my picks today, and you got that itch and all that shit, but dude, you're in the wrong place. I don't even give picks like that. I give analysis, and then you can make your own decision and your own picks. But yes, UFC locks, we're hitting at about 80%. How many units did you win, Rico? As many as you want to win, bro. It's on you. You bet as many as you want to bet. I don't tell you how to bet. I'm not a capper in that regard. I'm an analyst. So please know the product that you're paying for. Know what you're doing. We do have thousands upon thousands of members. It's very normal for me. But right now, what I want to do is give you guys a free episode, a podcast, talking about just the defensive linemen or some of the members on the defensive lines on some of these teams in the ACC and the American Athletic Conference. Typically, I would go American Athletic Conference first, and then I would go into the ACC to keep everybody here watching, and then we go from there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have you guys, not sure if you saw, but might want to check your Twitter messages from me. Terrible news. Evan Kramer, I think I know what it is. Thank you for interrupting the show with that. Let me check this offline real quick, guys. I apologize. Just got a message from Evan Kramer. I'm pretty sure it's going to be from Troy. It's not from Troy. It's unfortunate. Stay out of Hattiesburg. So we had another death, another college football member dying. Here's what I want to say to you guys. I don't make content about deaths. So today, unfortunately, we had Jerry West just passed away. Somebody said it's so sad. It's not really sad for me. I handle death differently than most people. I have been in the military for over 21 years, retired, and I've been around a lot of death in my life, personally, professionally, and I don't react to death the same way you do, or the same way society would expect someone to react to death. So I don't do a bunch of tribute videos. I think the only video I've made so far about somebody's death was O.J. Simpson, and the whole time I was just being facetious and saying he spent his life looking for the real killer, and he had a lead no one else had, because apparently the real killer was, on a golf course in Florida, and that's where he'd been looking every single day till the day he died. It's pretty good stuff. But no, I don't talk about deaths all that much, and I definitely don't make videos on deaths for clicks. I don't. Unless I have the news before anyone else and I'm telling you a story and it's like no one knew about it, but I try not to go there. So thanks for the update, Evan Kramer. I appreciate you. I'm so grateful it wasn't Lewis. Might start later than planned. I'm reading my own note, not knowing that I wrote it. But yeah, so we're going to talk about defensive linemen, and we're going to get into it. Thank you guys for being here. Like I said, it might be a little wave top, but you're going to learn more than you would on any recruiting website, on any, I don't know, Twitter account, whatever. Whoever covers these teams, I'm sure they try to deep dive them and talk, but it's always something they read on the internet that's kind of like the surface level, if you will. It bugs me. So you can go to our lads, but our lads is not always accurate when it comes to depth charts. I want to make that very clear right now. I go to the website often to get some names, but every time I go, I find errors every day, especially if it's like a group of 5 team. They literally have players still on the team that aren't there anymore. Like, they'll have a player listed and that dude is not there. That happens often, okay? But when you look at the defensive line at Boston College, something I'm going to tell you guys is last year we were able to predict when Boston College would get scored on, or at least I was, and it's because they do not have any type of team speed on their defensive line. They do not have any type of edge, if you will. You can beat them with a dual threat quarterback just catching the edge. And yes, a lot of that has to do with your outside linebackers. And please, if you're new to football, or maybe you're old to football, and you're like, what the hell is an edge, Rico? Setting the edge. Well, that's what they call defensive ends nowadays. Some defensive ends are considered edges, like in a 4-3 defense. And then there's like the 3-4 defense where the outside linebacker is the edge. So you don't know which one it is. So when I talk about defensive linemen, am I talking about that outside linebacker who's an edge? Sometimes I am, but most of the time I'm not. Most of the times they're the traditional linebackers, if you will. You will see a WLB, an MLB, and an SLB. That's for your weak side linebacker, strong side linebacker, or middle linebacker. Or they'll also say the Sam linebacker, the Mike, and the Will linebacker. I was going to say the Willis. And what's the difference between all of them is a whole nother conversation. Your middle linebacker, think of Mike Singletary. Think of a guy, Ken Norton Jr. He's in the middle of the defense. He's communicating with everybody, can cover sideline to sideline. Strong side linebacker, very, very tough. Usually lines up over the tight end. That's what dictates the strong side typically in traditional football, if you will. Obviously, teams are creating schemes to give different looks and go in motion before the snap. That's why you see all them dudes moving around all before the snap. They're trying to trick the defense into what's strong and what's weak, because they have different coverages and different things on the backside and the strong side. A lot of nuanced complexities there. What I would just want to tell you is that your strong side linebacker usually sets the edge. And then your weak side linebacker or your will backer is super athletic, can drop into coverage, can run plays down from the backside, can probably cover the back out of the backfield. All kinds of stuff, guys. There's a lot to it. I don't like to give you absolutes when it comes to football, because there's really no difference between the two if you ask me. Just get my best 11 guys on the field. So when I look at Boston College and I look at their defensive line, the one word I want to use to describe Boston College's defensive line is underwhelming. Absolutely underwhelming. You can see Nito here. All these guys started last year. A majority of them have been around the whole time, and they have no production of note. I'm talking about a team in Boston College that had, I think, 13 total sacks. If we go down here and we look, could you imagine as a team you finish the season with 13 total sacks? Not one person with more than 2 sacks. Not one. That's crazy, guys. That's just incredibly inefficient. And I know when you're trying to judge defensive linemen, people will talk about sacks not being as important as hurries, not being as important as pressures. And I think they're sadly mistaken. Sacks get you such an advantage because now they're behind the sticks, right? It was 1st and 10, and now it's 2nd and 14 if you get a sack. Now, yes, people can get sacks by falling on the pile. I can promise you if I go back and watch the film and find Cam Horsley's sack, this half a sack here is not anything significant. It might be him on one leg and Vinny DePalma on the other leg, and if you sneeze on the guy, you might get a sack. Another thing, in college football, if the quarterback is scrambling and running around and they run out of bounds in college football, if the quarterback runs out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage, they credit the nearest defender with a sack. I don't know if you guys knew that. Once again, if the quarterback's running around and he runs out of bounds with the ball behind the line of scrimmage, whoever was closest to him gets a sack. Insane. I remember discovering this. I was watching film looking for a sack. I was looking for this particular player's sacks. I wanted to make a highlight tape. So I looked in the box scores. I saw he had some sacks in the game. I turned on the game. I go look at the sacks, and I go, holy shit, there's no sacks in this game. I have not seen him get to the quarterback once. What are they talking about? And I had to find it. I had to go read the play-by-play. And then it said so-and-so sacked so-and-so at this time on the clock. I went to that play, and I looked at it, and looked at it, and looked at it, and I said, oh, my God. In college football, you get a sack if you run out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage. This is why Shedeur Sanders has been sacked so many times. Because he runs out of bounds with the ball instead of throwing it away for an incompletion and saving the yardage. Doesn't want to mess up his completion percentage. He'll run out of bounds with the ball. It's bananas, bro. I'm letting you know now. It's crazy. If you want to ask me any questions, TikTok, please jump over to YouTube, drop it in the chat. I will get to you, I promise. So, at the end of the day, Boston College's defensive line leaves a lot to be desired. A ton. And I don't know where they're going this offseason. I have yet to watch their spring game. I am actually watching all SEC spring games right now, but that's only because I did a deep dive on ACC teams early before the spring games existed, so I need to go back and watch them. But a lot of seniority, a lot of guys that have been around. These guys have been on the field for a long time and never get to the quarterback. Boston College's defensive line is a bunch of pacifists, if you will. They don't move me. I'm not excited about it. On the flip side, we're looking at Clemson. Clemson's defensive line, if I can put it to you in one word, I'm going to say professional. Professional. Clemson's defensive line is filled with NFL caliber players. Absolute studs, monsters, if you will. Before the season started, I told you Peter Woods is going to be the next great defensive lineman. I made a TikTok video on this. I was convinced. I watched film on Peter Woods. I was convinced I was watching a phenom, if you will. And Peter Woods was everything I ever asked for. He was starting on the defensive line as a true freshman and out there dominating. The only difference is he plays defensive tackle, and TJ Parker plays defensive end. And TJ Parker also started every single game as a freshman. I don't know about every game, but TJ Parker is the man who went out there and got 5.5 sacks as a true freshman. And that's what you're supposed to do when you're on the defensive line. And a guy like Peter Woods, 0 sacks. Some defensive tackles don't get sacks. It doesn't take away from their talent. When you look at this defensive line at Clemson, you're looking at players. A.J. Hoffler's amazing. I know how good these players are talent-wise. It'd be hard to improve upon them in the transfer portal. I'll say that right now. These are great players on the defensive line. I'm so impressed with the talent of Clemson. For me, it's a top 10 defensive line in America, if you will. And I believe the ACC probably has 3 of those. It has 3 of those, maybe even 4. I'd say 4. Man, they might have 5. No, they have some. I'd say they have about 6 in the top 25, 5 in the top 24, in the top 15, something like that. Like when I'm thinking about all the teams in the ACC and what they have, I'm gonna show you guys something. This guy right here, Vic Burley. Vic Burley is a man amongst boys And he still has yet to really get on the field and show anything. And I know how good he is. When I start seeing phenomenal players, third string, that's when you have depth. That's when you have a real program. You can judge Clemson for all that you want. You can say, well, they're not winning anything, Rico. Yeah, they won the ACC 2 years ago. And they can't win it this year or the last year because Cade Klubnik is playing like shit. Their wide receivers have left. But don't you dare get it twisted. They are grown-ass dudes in the middle. And how did they end last season? How did they end last season? If you look at Clemson and you go up here and you look at their schedule and you go to last season, they ended it with a 5-game win streak. 2 ranked opponents, 2 rivals, and an SEC team. They ended the season on a 5-game win streak. It's really impressive what they did after starting with that loss to Duke. They actually played really good in their losses, if you think about it, outside of that first Duke loss. Losing in overtime to Florida State, it's an amazing effort. Losing in double overtime to Miami, and it was on the road, and then losing to a phenomenally talented NC State team who had the best defender in college football, right? So shout out to them. I really like Clemson's defensive line. I think they're great. These are talented players. You should really sit down and just study each individual one of these guys, and you will see how good they are. This is what I do in my time. Like, this is not a hobby for me. This is my job. I sit down and I go and study every single one of these players and look for all their film. I just pick a team and deep dive in it for the day. It's an amazing feeling. Obviously, I know a lot of them. Obviously, I've done this for years upon years. So I've looked at Barrett Carter every single year. I mean, I looked at him at North Gwinnett. Like, I know exactly who these players are. But it's incredible to see the talent at a team like this, and people start thinking, oh, they're not any good. They're very talented on the defensive line. One of the top defensive lines I've seen. And then there's Duke. Duke goes out and homegrowns all their defensive linemen last year. Stud after stud after stud on the defensive line for them. A lot of it, not a lot of it, I'd say there was a decent amount were coverage sacks. And what I mean by that is they have really good defensive backs. They were really good in the defensive backfield. So you saw guys like Aeneas Peebles with his 5 sacks. You saw a little further down here, R.J. Oben with his 5 sacks. Now, Oben just transferred to Notre Dame, and Peebles just transferred to Virginia Tech. So you lose 2 amazing players on the defensive line, and you're left with a new coaching staff, and you're looking at your defensive lineman, and you're like, man, what are we going to do? Now, I'm going to tell you that Wesley Williams makes a lot of plays. That's fine. Aaron Hall, he's up front. He's busy, I guess. Not all that great, but he's there. And then you have this Kendi Charles kid showing up from Liberty. Kendi Charles, very experienced. Last year at Liberty, not so many. Like maybe, I think 3 sacks, maybe. Maybe I have it up here. I shouldn't even start talking. I do have it up. 3 sacks last year? Yeah, 3. 2023. But the years before, he has, over 5 sacks. So we know he can get it done if healthy, if in the rotation. I mean, I think he's got potential to be great. But he is short. 6 feet tall, 280. We're going to see what he can do at Duke. Duke with the new coach with Manny Diaz, they're going to have to figure some things out. But I really like where they're headed as a program. I really like their pedigree on defense. Obviously, losing your coach who developed all that defense is great. But when you go back and look at them, they were a complete unit on the defensive side of the ball. I believe this year they'll be led by their defense. They won't be as good as last year. They just won't. But they'll be led by their defense, and they'll try their best, I'm sure. Love their wide receivers, by the way. I was looking in here just to show you guys their transfer portal additions, but really it was their departures. Oben leaving, Peebles leaving, and one of their additions is already gone. Oh, I should talk about Will Sellers. I didn't see it. Maybe I did see it before I minimized it. So Will Seller coming over from Penn. I'm not excited about that move. I actually don't think he's of that same caliber, but they tend to get players from high academic institutions. It's Duke, and then obviously Charles coming over. And that was it. I thought they had one more kid, but he left. And they're not there. So, got 2 guys. The rest are going to be homegrown. Shout out to Duke. I'm going to get to the chat here in a second after Florida State. So, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and put it in the chat on on TikTok, and we'll go from there. But related, not related, but rumor are, yeah, I already talked about it, James Madden. I don't talk about deaths, bro. Thanks. Shout out to you. All right, so Florida State. Florida State's defensive line. Probably just as professional as Clemson, just a little more experienced. Just been around longer, so there's more to it. I need to get this ad off my screen. I cannot stand our lads, man. The amount of ads that pop up over here. Nobody cares, right? So when you start looking at it, you have Patrick Payton. One thing I want to tell you guys about Patrick Payton, and please pay attention when you watch Florida State next year, is his football IQ is through the roof. I talk about setting the edge, but sometimes defensive linemen need to know when they can't get there. They need to know when they can't get to the quarterback. They need to know when they're kind of beat in the moment. And I've never seen a player just have a knack for knowing when to bat down a pass. Patrick Payton, I think he's 6'6", with his hands extended. It's so hard to throw over that man. He literally will he'll bat down anything around him. And you can't throw in his direction. You can't run routes. So then you start lining him up, and if you got trips to one side, none of those routes are going to get completed. No slant, no quick out, no quick hitch. None of that's getting completed. You got to go over the top. So as a corner, you know, this guy's helping me. It's like when linebackers help with hook to curl or help with the slant. Same concept. You got a guy in Patrick Payton that's going to literally bat down passes. It's phenomenal. You got Farmer up in here. Big boy, just up front plugging everything. Darrell Jackson, hey, Miami transfer. He actually might get another year of eligibility. If you don't know, last year he was deemed ineligible by the NCAA because he said he was transferring to take care of his ailing grandmother. Turns out that was a bullshit excuse to try to get a waiver. But now the NCAA doesn't even have the teeth to implement waivers, punishments, and they don't have the authority to say whether or not you can and can't play. A judge took that away from them. So now Darrell Jackson's got an extra year of eligibility because he didn't play last year. He's just lifting weights. I think that's pretty promising for them up front with two different defensive tackles. Then you have Marvin Jones coming in, former 5-star, son of an NFL player. A lot of people are excited about Marvin Jones. It's the recruiting websites. He's 6'5", 250, and he's supposed to be great. I get it. I want to see it on a field. I have yet to see it on a field. They tell me he checks every box, Rico. The recruiting websites want to get this right so bad. And if he doesn't play great, he's a bust. The recruiting websites got it right. Think about what I'm saying. I'm being sarcastic as hell. The recruiting websites did not get it right if he doesn't play great. They missed, and missed horribly, and then blame the kid or the young man for not living up to their expectations and their accolades that they placed on him. I think it's ass backwards. When you start looking at the backup defensive linemen, the guys that are going to be in rotation, Grady Kelly coming in from Colorado State, very physically developed person, and same thing with Sione. I think that these guys coming in like this for their final year or last 2 years, they just want to be on a winning team. They don't care. They just want to be on a winning team because you're not going to get much tape. You're not getting drafted. They're not drafting these guys. You got to stick around for another year. They're drafting the starters, yes, but they're not drafting the backups. No, it's not happening. And then Tommy Wadurje, disappointed in him. I talked to him often, or not often. I've talked to him several times in the DMs. I'm disappointed only because I wanted him to be great at West Virginia. Right? He transferred. He initially started his career at Kentucky. This is an SEC recruit initially, 6'4", 250-ish, 260. Big kid, strong, athletic, does everything right, transfers to West Virginia, starts contributing, not the superstar, but he was good. And then now he transfers to Florida State, and he's back to third string. And I don't know how I feel about that. But once again, if you're getting paid and it's your decision, go do it. If they sold you on a book deal and they told you they're going to develop you, then more power to you. All in all, NFL, like these are all NFL guys. They're just good. Florida State's got a loaded defensive line. Don't ever forget that. Very good. I've actually been sitting down and really perplexed on how I feel about Florida State because I know how good this defense is. This defense is top-notch. This defense is starting to feel like the number one defense in the ACC for me as I keep watching film And I didn't feel that way at the beginning of the offseason, and I do now. I feel like they're right up there with Miami when it comes to defensive players and talent. Their offense isn't anywhere near Miami's, but I really like where they're going with these players. It's really about the secondary. I think they're going to get a lot of coverage sacks. I think the secondary is going to be locked in. You can't get open on these guys. I started studying the backups. Let me explain to you how I got here. I started studying the two deep and the backups. And as I study these guys and I look at them and I say, how amazing are they? And they're not the starters. Like, they're literally amazing players. That's why I made a video about Conrad Hussey last week. Because I turned on the tape and I went, whoa, how's he not starting? Well, they brought in Devontae Brown. He started 39 games at UCF and then spent a year at Miami on the bench last year. But he's a bona fide veteran, right? So it's just tough. It's tough assessing players in a vacuum, but I like Florida State defensive line. All right, before I go on to Georgia Tech, I'm going to go take over the chat over here. Thanks for being here, guys. I don't think I'll get a lot of chat today in the middle of the day. I understand that, but thanks for being here. So first and foremost, Derek H. says, yo, what up, Derek? Evan Kramer's letting me know there's terrible news. Then he says, Javon Solomon had more sacks than Boston College's entire team. Yeah, man. Isn't that crazy? Javon Solomon led the nation in sacks after, I think, Jalen Green got injured at JMU. So Solomon came back and did it. But, yeah, imagine you have an entire team, 13 sacks. How can I go out there? And I'm telling you, I've watched the hell out of their tape. I've watched every game over and over and over, just watching them defensive linemen, and I'm like, man, they're not getting it there. I would fire my defensive line coach mid-season. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you guys get fired, we fire position coaches all the time. We fire coordinators all the time when things don't go right. Mid-season, you give up too many points, you don't get enough first downs, you don't get enough touchdowns, you get fired. Well, at what point do you fire a defensive line coach? Like, what does he have on you? Does he have pictures of your spouse? What's going on? That's why Hafley's at Green Bay now and no longer at Boston College. Not holding those guys accountable will get you fired for sure. Not holding your position coaches accountable will get you fired. And I want to tell you guys something. I'm going to let you guys know. I'm going to put it out there, okay? I think there's some lazy position coaches in college football. I have a position coach. And I'm not going to say his name because we're cool. We're cool. But in my assessment, I had a position coach write to me and say, hey, Rico, can you please tell me who the top 20 players are in the transfer portal in my position group? Who are your top 20 players in the position group? Now, this is a position coach at an FBS, FCS school. He's employed by the university. And he's asking me to give him my list. And I remember initially I was like, well, I don't want to give him my list because maybe it's wrong. Maybe I need to work on it. So I wrote back to him and I was like, yo, give me like 2 hours. And he was like, look, man, I hope I can show it to you guys. I'll show you guys the messages if I can find it. Oh, man, I just tagged him in a video yesterday. I'm giving away too many hints. I'm joking. Let me see. I want to show you guys, peel back the curtain a little bit about how I feel about position coaches. Because what happened was, and if I'm being just direct about it, is he asked me for the list. I said, yeah, man, give me about an hour or two. I got to double check my list. All my names. I got to make sure they're still in the portal, right? I got to do things. Give me about an hour or two. He's like, no problem, man. Just send me anything. And it had me thinking, I know what that's like. I think their boss says, hey, I want a list of who you value in the transfer portal by close of business today. Hey, before you go home today, let me know who your top 20 are. He's like, all right, I'll get back to you. And instead of doing the legwork, and instead of watching all the huddle film, watching all the players and doing all the assessment, he just hit me up. I eventually gave him my chart. I eventually gave him a chart specifically for him and his school. I gave him a chart that I thought his school could value these players. And I put the chart together, and I sent it to him. And when I give a chart, I give a little more, I'm verbose. If you guys don't know what that means, is I'm very detail-oriented. I give a lot of information. So I'll give you like injury history, character concerns. I have like different charts with different blocks and different things. So I gave him all my information. And he wrote me back, and he's like, oh, you're a lifesaver. And when I get stuff like that, I'm like, I appreciate it. We'll keep talking. Lifesaver, bro? You're being lazy? I saved your life? Whose life is, like, who's threatening your life? Someone gonna fire you if you don't give them an answer by the end of today? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I felt about it. So just all that to say this is position coaches have the opportunity to evaluate talent every day if they have the discipline. Like, you got to work with the players all day. You got to go out there and do your thing, and then you need to sit down and have the discipline to evaluate players. And some coaches evaluate players better than others. And I think when you're out there getting 13 sacks on a season, you might be struggling with teaching them the fundamentals of the defensive line. Sure, you might be struggling with teaching them how to be effective pass rushers. But you might have just had a whole room full of guys that aren't really that good, and you evaluated their talent wrong. And I'm not the first person to question it. I'm just the first person that has the audacity to put it in a video, when everybody else just assumes they're all experts. Like, a lot of you guys write to me all the time and go, Rico, I'm sure you think you know better than so-and-so. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I do know better than so-and-so. That person that you think is an expert is employed in that position for the next year or two, and then they're fired, and then they never get that position again. I'll be analyzing long after they're gone. I will be identifying talent long after they're gone. They don't know what they're doing. And what validates me in my assessment is, I had a guy write to me today, and he's like, where'd you play? And I was like, bro, I don't think where I played would have any bearing on my assessment of that player and his inability to be effective. I think people need to understand that you can watch a movie. Having never acted in a movie, you can tell what's a terrible movie. I heard they made Star Wars gay, right? Okay, congratulations. I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't know if the acting's great or not. But I know when bad acting is, and I've never been in a movie. I know what bad food tastes like, and I didn't cook it. Right? You can make an observation from a third party all day long. I know a bad pet owner, and you don't have a pet. Oh, you don't even own a dog. Yeah, I know, bro, but I can see you mistreating that one. So when I see a player not quite up to par, yeah, I don't have to be in the room to know that. I can just see it from my purview. So watching Boston College defensive linemen left a lot to be desired. Sorry for the long tangent. I'm going to go back to the chat. I just saw two new things. Actually, you guys can write those. Sit tight. I will get back to them on the next break. I'm going to get back into these teams here. So let's go to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech defensive line. First thing I'm going to say about Georgia Tech's defensive line is they have been missing on a ton of talent. They're trying to get it right. They got raided in the transfer portal last offseason. Right? Achilles Stone went over to Ole Miss. They had a bunch of players depart. And then when they found replacements, they weren't quite there. Last year, Kyle Kennard led this entire defense in sacks. He was great. But he just left to South Carolina. Like, hey, I'm bouncing. Good player on the edge. Daquan Dose leaving to Michigan State. I'm out of here. He plugs the middle. But you're getting guys like Height, Romello Height, a miss at USC. Eddie Kelly coming in. Departing, going to Missouri. It's another good player, young player, and you're missing out on the talent. Thomas Gore coming in is what I meant to say. And Thomas Gore used to play at Georgia State. He was just this little I call him a chunk, and don't take it personal, but when I watch tape, it's not real when I see a guy who's like 5'11", 300 pounds as a defensive tackle. But that's exactly what Thomas Gore is. He's just this stout little guy that just plugs that A gap and tries to keep everybody off his linebackers. He knows his role. I appreciate it. He went to Miami last year. Probably not the best move, but that one's pretty decent. Losing Rubin to UMass, not a big deal. Ayo Tafasi is not at Georgia Tech anymore, at least from what I understand, and he was going to be a good get for the defensive tackles up front. Left Florida State, goes here. This is a guy that I think Florida State wanted in their rotation. It didn't work out. But for the most part, you see everybody left. And this is because Brent Key, the head coach of Georgia Tech, had to clear out everybody on defense. And I'm talking about coaches. Once again, back to the position coaches and that whole side of the ball. We need to address it because they were terrible. There's no other way to put it. Georgia Tech was terrible on the defensive line and great on offense. So you see Kyle Kennard leaving with 6 sacks. He's gone. Nobody else. You had a linebacker at 3 sacks. Nobody else worth talking about. All linebackers. Andre White, 2.5 sacks. Dose, gone. All right. You have no production returning on the defensive line. I think it's going to be difficult for Georgia Tech up front. They don't match up well in the ACC for the most part. And they're going to outscore you. They're going to have to. Then we get to one of these teams like this, Louisville. Louisville's defensive line is not to be played with. One thing you should pay attention to on Louisville's defensive line is the seniority that isn't starting. Theoretically isn't starting over here. You see all these seniors, all this seniority, they've played a lot of football, and they're really good. I think Pure Year, and Rieger each had... We got the stats here. They each had 5 sacks, I'm sure. I've watched all the tape, and they get to the quarterback. So, where is it at? 5 sacks. Mason Rieger, 5. Okay, and, I guess I was wrong. 4? Oh, yeah, period 4. I said they both had 5. So, 5 and 4 sacks each, and they're backups. Guys. They're really, really good, and they're not even starting anymore because of the transfers. So I'll talk about this. Thor Griffith did not know who he was before this offseason because he played at Harvard. So he played in the Ivy League. Very dominant defensive lineman, very strong, very stout. Fuck stud, bro. Stud. And then you have Gerard transferring in, another big body guy. It's surprising me that he's starting, but I get it. You go out there and you find these guys, these monsters, for their final year before they go to the league. Jernigan, stud player as well. Like, all 3 of these guys, I get it. But nobody's messing with Ashton Gillett. Like, this guy right here, Ashton is top 5 edge rushers in America. Top 5 edge rushers in America. Ashton, not messing with him. This is a man who had 11 sacks last year. 11. You're talking about a guy that is just changing the game fundamentally. You see it over here. 3 forced fumbles. 3 forced fumbles and 11 sacks. That's 14 impact plays, and we're not even talking about the hurries. We're not even talking about the pressures. We're talking about 14 game-changing plays. It's incredible. Ashton is him. Louisville's defensive line is that good. I think they have depth. There's your Thor Griffin kid. Had to go look up everything on him. I went back and watched all 5 of these sacks. I went back and watched as much film as I could on, and it's hard to find Harvard games. I found highlights. But I'm telling you, this kid is him. 6'2", 305. I have people writing me DMs going, Rico, is Thor Griffin him? Is Thor Griffin him? And I'm like, who the hell? Okay, so Jordan Gerard, the FIU transfer. I wanted to talk about him. For whatever reason, he just has a little more juice than everybody else. I went back and watched the tape at FIU. He's 6'3", 305, or 300 pounds. They say 295, but he's over 300 pounds. Just got more juice. He looks like a dancing bear. He looks nimble. He looks athletic. I love the depth they have on their defensive line. They got 8 guys. They're very comparable to Miami, Florida State, Clemson. They're there on their defensive line. So shout out to Louisville. Love their defensive line. Next one, Miami. You ain't messing with Ruben Bain, and they found out the hard way. Face first as a freshman, Ruben Bain out there dominating the show. C.J. Clark, what a monster. And then Marley Cook, We'll see what happens with Marley Cook. We'll see. Tyler Barron, everybody's talking about him with those 6 sacks at Tennessee last year. And then Elijah Austin just came in from Marshall, I believe. Let me double check that. I hate not getting that right. Yeah, Marshall. Complete stud. Miami's defensive line, if you go back in here, obviously they're going to have a lot of linebacker help. But there's Ruben Bain right there. 7.5 sacks as a true freshman. Pretty studly, if you will. Watching him, you're just like, oh, that's an All-American. That's a freshman All-American. That's a pro. And that's what you're dealing with, a pro. Okay? Losing a couple of these guys, I don't think it's the end of the world, but it happened. Some defensive linemen leaving in the transfer portal. You don't have them again. Losing Kelly was a big deal because he's a highly recruited guy. Losing Thomas Gores here. But you're having to make do with other transfers, okay? We have yet to see, well, besides Bain, we have yet to see everybody else. They don't have it all filled out. There's a bunch of other guys trying. I watched the spring game trying to look for it, but remember, not everybody's going 100%. So I'm just trying to look for some juice and some extra players. At the end of the day, they got a decent front 8. I wouldn't say it's Clemson. Right, there's like Florida State, Louisville. I'm going to get into the other teams right now. I don't want to exclude them. So far that we've been through Florida State, Louisville, Clemson, and then Miami in that order right now. Just so we're clear, yes, there's other teams. Yes, there's other players that are pretty decent. The ACC has some loaded defensive lines. You have to know how good this defensive line is here at North Carolina. You might not get too excited, but what you don't see is a ton of transfer defensive linemen not coming in. Something they do really well is evaluate their defensive linemen coming out of high school. They tend to find the right players. I want to say Silver left. He was a 5-star left because he couldn't get in the starting lineup. So there have been a few guys that have left because they couldn't get in the starting lineup. But North Carolina's defensive line, Cedric Gray doesn't count, but this guy Rucker is going to be the reason their defensive line is any good, right? And I think Rucker's back. I'm sure Rucker's back. What am I saying? Rucker's back. And he plays this position called Jack. Well, that's what I was talking about. When you watch the line, when you watch the defense, you will see this guy just show up. And they don't call him a defensive lineman. They call him a Jack. But he's getting all the sacks. That, to me, the production's on point. But they got other guys that just kind of plug the middle and do their job to allow their two linebackers to get all the sacks. And that would be Rucker and Gray last year. Cedric Gray, obviously, in the NFL. I really like the way North Carolina's defense plays. I do. I love what they're doing, the way they look. They obviously are going to have coverage sacks. Please understand that. Elijah Huzzy is back as long as he's healthy. And Tervius Lane, I think he's a transfer from Georgia State. Come on now. Give me my money. Give me my money. Give me my money. Lane, the transfer from Georgia State, like I said. Marcus Allen, I remember watching him play in high school. Did he play at Walton? Are we doing this? Are we doing this now? Are we doing this now? Are we doing this? My God. I could tell you where these boys played high school, what colleges they come from. Shout out to Elijah Huzzy. Came out of Heard County, was a quarterback in high school, ended up going the FCS route, ETSU. Then from there, ended up at North Carolina. Tremendous punt returner, tremendous player. I think the strength of this team is their defensive backs, and they're going to cause coverage sacks. Another thing you need to think about when you're playing some of these teams is if you're terrible, teams do not have to throw against you. They already have the lead. They just run the ball out and they end the game, right? Shout out to Boston College. If you're terrible, like Virginia, teams are not going to have to throw to try to catch up, to keep pace. I think North Carolina's offense is pretty good. I think it's pretty good, and it's pretty much just pace hour, getting open, okay? Max Johnson better complete some passes, and give that to Myron Hampton. Give it to Myron Hampton. Let him get his 1,500 yards, whatever it is. But for me, this team feels like very average in the ACC next year. I'm not too excited about North Carolina as a whole. The defensive line is productive, but it's just going to be another great year for Rucker. If you ask me, another great year for Rucker, and coverage sacks are making it happen. But all these players, you see all these seniors and graduates, physically developed monsters who've been around for many years and who have been starting. They're not sitting the bench. These guys have been starting. They've been playing. They're ready to go. And you know the caliber of players they have. You do because, well, I don't know if you do, but I do. Because when I see their transfers and they go to other schools, it's always like former 4-star, former 5-star. They have such a loaded team on that side of the ball. They got to figure it out. They needed to show up on Saturdays. North Carolina State. Kind of misleading when you look at North Carolina State's stats. Everything was about Peyton Wilson. If you didn't watch Peyton Wilson play last year, it's unfortunate. He was the greatest player in the country. 138 tackles, 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, passes deflected everywhere. He just did everything. Peyton Wilson is the best player I saw on defense last year, most complete player. But when you look at that, what he did was he caused so much distraction that other players were getting sacks, if you will. Other players were getting production because they were having to deal with him. Now, he's not here anymore. But even when I look at this, I wonder, like, our lads, I don't know if our lads watches film. I don't know who works for our lads. I don't know who watches film. But when you watch film, there's no way Red Hibbler, it shouldn't be a starter over Price. Like, unless Van and Hibbler are staying on the left side like this, and they're choosing not to start. But Hibbler is a starter. Van is a starter. And then Chaz Wallace, the transfer coming in from Colorado, really a transfer from ODU. Didn't play much at Colorado. I didn't understand the transfer. If you can't play at Colorado, you can't play at NC State. If you're not in the starting lineup, what are you doing? Oh, you're transferring to be a backup? You just want to be closer to home? I get it. Okay, my bad. Congrats. But you're not doing this shit. You're not with these guys. And I think Hibbler's good, too. When I watch film, Hibbler pops on tape. So we're talking about 5.5 sacks in Darvin and David Van, and then Hibbler 6.5 sacks, even more. Yeah, in a short period of time. I just feel like Hibbler, you got to get both those guys on the field, Hibbler and Van, and I think they're rotating series or whatnot, but Hibbler and Van are them. Just so we're clear. Pitt's defensive line is going to be in trouble, y'all. Don't worry about any of this stuff. Like, it's not going to matter. Yeah, they try to find some transfers. It's all kind of – I like Bam Brima a lot. He's been around for a while. I like Bam Brima. The fact that they don't have him starting is weird. At this point, he should probably be starting. They lost all their defensive linemen. Colorado took 2 of them. South Carolina took 2 of them. South Carolina took the 2 good ones. Colorado took 2 young ones. Like, well, 1 old, 1 young. But it's – man, when I tell you how good DeAndre Jules is – like, you have to see it in person. You have to watch the film. DeAndre Jules, I believe he wore number 0. Is he number 0 on tape or number 8? No, he's number 0, yeah. See, so if you're a football player, you know this, or a coach. When you watch film, you're watching jersey numbers. When you watch film, you watch jersey numbers. You do it by numbers because names is too much. So, like, you're calling jersey numbers out. Everything about your film study is jersey number driven. Hey, when number 11's in the slot, this is what happens when 13's here. So when I watch film, it's the same way. I'm watching jersey numbers, and I see 0 on the defensive line. That dude is special, man. So he's at South Carolina. Bam Brima's still here. NFL. Deion Hayes, Colorado. Bengali Kamara, South Carolina. DeShields, I think he went to Texas A&M somewhere. So it's just a shame that they got to try to figure it out without all the guys they recruited. Samuel Okunlola looks amazing on tape, and he's at Colorado. He looks great as well. Yeah, lost a lot of good players this offseason and just didn't replace them with the right caliber of player, if you ask me. I think Pitt's defensive line looks sick. Like, it just looks sickly. It's not quite there. Not quite there. Linebackers and defensive backs, they brought back most of their guys. Offensively, they're going to be fine. Nate Arnell's a good quarterback, and Mumfield's a hell of a receiver. Rodney Hammond's been there for years now. Yeah, they got some players, and a new offensive coordinator, the Western Carolina coach. So we'll see what happens, bro. All right, we're on Syracuse. And after I'm going to finish the whole thing, and then I'm going to go back to the chat before I get onto the American Athletic Conference. So looking at Syracuse, we have Fadil Diggs, Deion Wilson Jr., And some others. Let me tell you guys something. Oh, Isaiah Hastings coming in. Yeah, so you go and get some big names. Some guys that people know, like some Georgia and Alabama recruits of some sort, like Hastings. I'm not impressed with that at all. He's not a good player, not on film. Doesn't look good to me at all. Maybe he'll get developed. Maybe the coaches know more than I do or can make something out of him, but I don't see it. Defensive coordinator for Syracuse just got hired, was the defensive line coach at A&M, and that's how you get Fidel Diggs over here. What concerns me is he didn't bring a lot more players because I felt like there were a lot of players you could have brought in from the transfer portal, from A&M, if you had that type of relationship. We've seen it happen a number of times at other programs where they follow their coach. This didn't happen here. Only one guy came for the most part. They did get some studs in the secondary. It's going to help you with your defensive line. But Deion Wilson is not as good as advertised. He's not as good as people think, at least not from my perspective. And the defensive line at Syracuse was so pathetically slow that I started predicting accurately all the over yards for every single dual threat quarterback that they faced at the end of the season. I knew they couldn't set the edge. I knew they couldn't stop an option of any sort. They wouldn't even get the pitch guy, right? So if you don't know how that works, you don't block a defensive end. You pitch off of the defensive end. So your tackle will get up on a linebacker. Your receiver will crack back on a linebacker. You'll either pitch on the defensive end or the corner. That's how the option works. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going a little too fast. My bad. It is what it is. Learn football. So you don't block the defensive end, and then you go run the option at him. And if he commits to the quarterback, you pitch it. If he commits to the running back, you keep it and you go. Teams were getting 200 yards rushing on these guys because they had no speed on the defensive line. So Fidel Diggs is going to have to change everything. And Deion Wilson, I mean, you're running a 3-4 front, so it's really about the outside linebackers. If they're telling me they're running a 3-3-5, which is what they show me here on this chart, I like it. It's fine because you want more speed on the field. And you got a guy like Devin Grant coming in from Buffalo, who I love. One of the very best. He's like 6'5 safety. He's amazing. I love Devin Grant. He's on any list I got to make. Devin Grant. He's a pro. Deuce Chestnut coming back home after the failed transfer and then coming back. It's all good, man. Defensive line needs a lot of work, and I think they know that. They found, a player or two to show up, but I think it's a long way to go. I really do. I don't like their defensive line at all. Shout out to Syracuse. Hope it works out. On tape, bad. Speaking of bad, Virginia's defensive line is just as bad as Boston College, if not worse. This is a team that was trailing in most games, and teams do not have to throw, so that you're not going to get any production from them. They get ran over. They don't make plays. Yes, they're very mature, senior laden. Not impressed with Virginia's defensive line. They'll have to prove me wrong, but I won't even name the players. They're not good. Virginia Tech. And I say I won't name the players. The names were obviously on the screen. I could have read them to you, but it doesn't matter, man. I wanted to get to the goods, to the known goods, and that's Saxburg. Saxburg. Blacksburg. This is where Virginia Tech is, right? Virginia Tech has one of the very best defensive lines, probably fourth or fifth. Let's go with fifth. Probably fifth best in the ACC. Antoine Powell-Ryland dominated last year. This is a transfer from Florida. Absolutely dominated. And then you have Aeneas Peebles coming in from Duke. Kelvin Gilman. I don't remember where he's coming in from. I could have pulled up the chart. And that's crazy that I don't. Oklahoma. I should know this. But at the end of the day, dudes are ballers. Okay? They found studs. Keeping everybody off of Sam Brumfield really matters. That's a Middle Tennessee linebacker that just transferred in. He makes fumbles occur. He makes interceptions. This guy makes plays. Okay? All of these guys are very good. They don't have a lot of depth, but they have great starters. I don't feel too good about the depth. I don't. I've went back. I've watched the film. It's a big drop-off for me. Like, the talent's not equivalent. It's a big drop-off. But seeing Antoine Powell-Ryland come into his own was awesome because this is a guy who couldn't get in the starting lineup at Florida because they kept playing that Princely UManly kid. Whatever. This dude got way more productive. Now I know he's playing in the ACC. I'm excited to see where they end up. I like Virginia Tech's defensive line. Probably fifth best in the ACC. I'm going to probably rank them after this on Twitter. Maybe. I got stuff to do. Then we're looking at Wake Forest. Not good on the defensive line, but definitely not terrible. But there's a pro here. There's a pro on the defensive line for Wake Forest, and it's Jasheen Davis. He's a pro's pro. There's no stopping that man. Watch the tape. He's been at Wake Forest the whole time. He ain't going nowhere else. He's a Wake Forest defensive lineman, and a great one at that. So I like him. Bryce Gaines came in 2 years ago, last offseason. Pretty decent player. Both of those guys, for me, Bryce Gaines and Jasheen Davis, yeah, pretty solid. I like Davis a lot, though. When you watch tape, Jacob Roberts came in last year from an HBCU. North Carolina A&T? Yes, North Carolina A&T. Came in, played great. All his sacks were in one game. Don't get it twisted. He had 6 sacks. It doesn't matter. Jasheen Davis, dominant all season long. It's very rare when you see defensive linemen with 40-something tackles. Very rare to see defensive linemen with 40-something tackles. And then Pointer's the same way. Okay, Pointer, a ton of tackles. I like the tackles up front for Wake Forest. But that's because teams were just running the ball. Teams already had the lead. They didn't need to throw. They're not trailing. They're not trying to come from behind. You had a terrible quarterback in Mitch Griffiths, who, by the way, just left Marshall. Like, in the last week, he just quit Marshall. He transferred to Marshall and then quit. Found out, hey, man, I can't play over there. They got a bunch of other quarterbacks they like more than me. Yep, and now it looks like his career will probably be over. And he's got a brother. He transferred to JMU last year. Or ODU. JMU? Maybe JMU. I don't know, man. Them Griffiths kids. Wish them well. Wake Forest has a pro. Now the new teams in the ACC. SMU, studs at SMU. Elijah Roberts is an NFL prospect. Elijah Roberts is must-watch TV. When you're watching SMU defensive line, pay attention to number 5. A new face on the defensive line is number 15. I love him. I love Cameron Robertson. I made a video about Cameron Robertson last year after I saw his huddle tape and everything he did at North Texas in a very short period of time. Then he transferred to SMU, wasn't in the starting lineup. That's fine. But here he is now, and he's slated to start. I think he's ready. I think he's a stud. I love everything about him. They have depth for days. Everybody's pretty decent when they get on the field, but their starting 4 are where it's at. Kobe Wilson, a transfer from Temple, right? Monster. And then Ahmed Walker, transfer from Liberty. These are all very, very good players. I like their front 7 all the way around. Their front 7's real. Cale Sanders is untouchable. Like, they have a good team, man. They're comparable to the ACC. Probably 6th best defensive line in the ACC, and they just showed up. I love it. Shout out to them. I owe you guys Cal and Stanford on their defensive line. I actually don't even have their depth charts pulled up. I can just tell you that both of them last year, terrible. Like, they didn't impress me at all. And there was a lot of opportunity to make plays for a lot of these defensive lines. I've gone through every single one of them. I know who they are. It's just when I watch individual defensive linemen and just sit down and study them for who they are, like individually, are you productive? Do you make it happen? Did you do your responsibility? Did you impact the play positively? I have like a whole chart of things I'm looking for. Cal, no, and no, and no again. And it might be their scheme. It might be their coach, but it doesn't happen. At the same time, when I watch a defense like Stanford's, they also don't make plays. All the plays are made by their linebackers and secondary guys. All the tackles, everything. It's like the defensive linemen just occupy space, and they just try to set the line of scrimmage and don't try to do anything with it. They intentionally aren't productive. Like, they'll be one of the few teams. Look at this. You can see it here. Leading tacklers. You don't have a single defensive lineman in the top fucking 11, 12 guys. You don't see them till you start getting down here. And it's like, okay, so what are we doing? Well, we're just occupying space. And you go watch the tape, and it's just guys kind of in a shoving match, almost like sumo wrestling. They just get kind of tied up. But it frees up room for your linebackers to make plays. But what it does is it starts the play at 3 yards. Like, the running back's bound to get 3 yards before it gets to a linebacker. It's weird, man. If a safety's leading you in tackles, that's awesome for that safety. That's terrible for your defense. If a safety's leading you in tackles. Because that means they're getting first downs every play. Right? It's just logic. So I'm going to leave it at that. I do need to talk to you guys about the American. Hold up. I'm going to go to the chat, though. Let's go with college football depth chart. They'll take me to our lads. And then from here, I can go look at depth charts in American. I'm not going to pull them all up. Let me pull up the ones I'd love to talk about right off rip, because I just know, right? Oh, they still have SMU listed in the American. That's not right. Ooh, South Florida's going to have a decent defensive line. So is Tulane. No. And I love UTSA. It's unfortunate, though. It's not going to happen. The rest of these teams look pretty bad. Defensive lines are bad. I'll get to those guys after the chat. Let's go to the chat, and then we'll wrap up the show. Thanks for being here, guys. Hey, Rico, thoughts on Toafili and Earl Little for FSU? Divine Obsidian, my thoughts on Toafili and Earl Little. Why do you know their names? Let's start with that. Why do you know their names? Is it a recruiting website? Is it a recruiting ranking? Or is it something they did on a Saturday? That's number one. So Toafili, being a backup running back, at Florida State for some time now, never really being the guy. When I watch him on a Saturday, I am thoroughly unimpressed with everything he does. Nothing he does is remarkable. It's going to go down as one of those marginal running backs at a power school for me. Not impressed. Earl Little, I've been impressed with the fact that in the spring, they started telling me he's going to be a starter. Nickelback, right? He's going to be the nickel. And more power to him. But I've never been impressed with Earl Little. He goes in the same vein as Des Ricks, right? The A&M transfer from, everybody's at Alabama or Georgia, one of the two schools, and they're all 5 stars and they're all great and everything. But for me, I always ask the same question every single time you guys bring up players like this, and that's, why do you know their name? What did they do on a Saturday that warrants you knowing their name, right? There's a huge difference from a recruiting hype to actual production, because all those stars, the stars do matter in getting you the opportunity to get to the right program to be developed. But when you get to that campus, you aren't the first 4 or 5 star player in that position group. You aren't the first guy off the bus that's gonna start. No, you get to that campus, you find other people equivalent to you, and then everybody goes metal sharpens metal. No, and then the stars don't matter at that point. There's nothing else. Maybe one day when they start investing NIL in players before they ever play at a significant level, then that player will immediately be put in the starting lineup because of the NIL investment. But right now, it's all talent driven. And if you don't have the right talent, you're not going to start. Or you don't have the right, ability, you're not starting. I'd say when a young man gets to college, it's very difficult to become a starter right out the blocks just because of how much you need to learn. And I'm referring to not just fundamentals, but the playbook, the scheme. Learning how to play at that level is much harder than anticipated. And I would say it's hard on a defensive back to learn coverages, recognizing schemes, reading certain things. I think it's easier for wide receivers and running backs because they can just get the ball. And, a running back, I used to say something as a coach, run to daylight. I used to say that as a coach. When I would talk to my players, if you got a handoff and you didn't know where to go, you didn't know the hole, you didn't know anything, where's the daylight? Where's the gap in the defense? Find it. Find it right now. Don't run into the back of a lineman because I told you to. Don't run there because that's where the play was designed to go. Use your natural athleticism and run to daylight a little bit. It's what Barry Sanders did. It's what the great ones do, right? And yes, you'll get benched if you run the wrong play and you go the wrong route. If you keep bouncing that run onto the outside, I will bench you. But I also understand that there's certain athleticism and natural traits you need to be able to utilize, and I'm hindering you from doing that if I don't tell you to run to daylight. So a lot of these recruits don't have that luxury when they're on the offensive line or they're in a highly dependent position like the secondary. Remember, if you get beat on the offensive line or the defensive line, the results are typically a first down. Or lack thereof, a first down, right? So I would say, if you get beat on the defensive line and you get blown off the ball or you get kicked out or you do something wrong, they're going to gain 5 yards. That's a 5-yard mistake. you're in the secondary and you read the wrong coverage, you don't react appropriately, you bite on a double move, you get beat, it's not 5 yards. It's a touchdown. It's game altering. You just lost us the game. So the stakes are that much higher when we're dealing with the secondary. I would love to have more mature players in the secondary. People who have been around, have seen different quarterbacks, know how to read their eyes when they're looking them off, know their tendencies. People who study film, understand what this means and that means. You know, I used to study wide receiver stance, and I would know when a guy was running a slant versus an out based on his stance and his alignment. Where I would study hash mark alignment. I studied tape like crazy. I was a free safety in a corner. I studied it like crazy because I needed to know what's about to happen in front of me. And I think a lot of players don't have that ability or that need to know what's about to happen in front of me. They don't need to. They just go out there and say, we're just going to play. Pick a basketball game. Let's just run next. Who's got next? Let's just run it. That's Cormani McLean's method of defense. Let's just go run it. And that's the type of stuff that will have you on the bench because you're not an extension of your coach. You need to get on the field and be an extension of your coach. Coach needs to believe in you and trust you to do exactly what he anticipates you should be doing. Can you go out there and do what I have told you to do? And if we don't trust to that degree, you'll never see the field. So, yeah, I just always ask you guys, how do you know Earl Little? How do you know these players? Also, thoughts on Ruben Bain? His high school stats were insane. Well, never mind. Yeah, so once again, don't get too carried away with high school stats for the most part. I do watch huddle film. I don't care what the stats say. I don't care about your yards per carry. I don't care about how many interceptions you had. And the reason I don't care is because in the high school level, you can get a ton of interceptions based on just really bad throws. Just the quarterback chucked it up, threw it to the wrong person. Have you ever watched a highlight tape and just seen a bunch of bad throws? And you just go, hey, why are you showing me all these interceptions? I say it all the time when I watch high school film reviews. I don't want to see this interception. It's irrelevant. Show me good fundamentals. Show me your back pedal and how sticky you are. Show me if you can drive back to the quarterback getting out of your back pedal. Show me if you can read a route before it's ran. Do you get stemmed and thrown off, and does he create space on you? I don't know, because you just keep showing me this elementary-like interception of a duck, and then you ran it back for a touchdown. That's great. I know you're fast. I know you can run, but I need to see your coverage fundamentals. Can you please not show me this shit every single play? I do not care about interceptions. Same thing with sacks, though. You could be a great defensive lineman and get no sacks. What if you just play in a conference or in a league where everybody runs the wing tee? You're in high school football. Everybody runs the wing tee. What's it fucking matter, right? I remember when I was a young man, the very first player that I ever saw that caught my attention was a guy named Chris Claiborne. He wore number 55 at JW North in Riverside, California. And Chris Claiborne went on to be number 55 for USC, went on to play in the NFL. And Chris Claiborne was amazing. And you could tell even when he wasn't making the tackle. You could tell even when he wasn't making the play, right? The play doesn't matter. Like he's just, you're watching for athleticism and ability. I watched Ronnie Lott's son. His name was Ryan Neese. He played outside linebacker at UCLA, and then he played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ronnie Lott's son, Ryan Neese, played at Pacific High School. I watched him in the CIF Championship 1997 against Bloomington. And Bloomington ran a wing T offense, and they were the highest scoring offense in the nation. A guy named Markham had created this wing T offense that was a special type of offense. It wasn't your normal wing T. And it was only had 22 players on the team. And they had won the CIF title, the state championship essentially at that time. They won it like 4 years in a row. And they had this fullback named Chuchu Luna, a running back named Cedric Mullen. And I remember all these players. And they were playing against this school, Pacific. And Pacific had a quarterback in Ryan Neese. He's a quarterback. And he's a linebacker. But he's a quarterback. And everybody in the crowd keeps going, that's Ronnie Lott's son. This is before the internet. I'm what? 13 years old? 12, 13 years old. I'm watching this and I'm going, that's Ronnie Lott's son? Oh, shit. And in Southern California, Ronnie Lott's royalty, right? I'm like, oh, my God, look at this guy. And then I remember him going to UCLA. And I'm like, why is he not the quarterback? I just watched him play for a CIF championship at quarterback. And that's when I learned, TJ Duckett's not a quarterback either. But TJ Duckett was a quarterback at the same time, and he's at Michigan State now playing linebacker, getting ready to get drafted by the Falcons. So I learned the stats in your high school. While production is important, your stats, it's all dependent on where they need you, where you're playing. I need to start looking for athleticism. And I learned that at a very young age. I learned that as a teenager when I was assessing talent and watching players and just so observant. While other kids were sitting there watching and paying attention to touchdowns, I was watching stuff off the ball. And I've always been that way. So it's just how I feel. It's just how I feel about certain things. I like Ruben Bain, but it's not about just the production. It's the fact that he beat out 3 upperclassmen to become a starter at Miami. The production's a byproduct of how great you are, right? So I like Ruben Bain. And once again, Ruben Bain, why do you know his name? It's not about his high school stats. It's about what he did on a Saturday, right? Some of the other guys didn't do. Thoughts on Sings and Butler at Charlotte? Well, let's talk about it. I'm going to pull up Charlotte here right now. For me, Sings and Butler don't necessarily move me, if you will, especially Butler. I was really impressed. So let me say this. The leaders on this defense last year, look at that right there. Look at this shit. They have Hill Green still on Charlotte. He's at Colorado. Oh, you guys can't even see the chart. Oh, man, I'm talking to myself. I'm sorry, guys. One-man show. I'm looking at this. Look at this. They have Hill Green right here. He's not there anymore. He's at Colorado, and he's a great linebacker. When I watch Charlotte on tape, some of the things that stick out, Balfour is amazing. Some of they had another DB. He transferred out and he left. They had great linebacker play, even though one of them was a criminal. I want to get into that. But when it comes to the defensive line, I was not impressed with their defensive line play. I'm excited and encouraged to see what comes of Demon. If you guys don't know Demon Clowney, he's a transfer from Ole Miss. Yes, he's Jadeveon Clowney's cousin. Probably belongs at this echelon. Shockley's decent. Wallace is decent. These guys are all decent on tape. They really are. They're not bad. But, man, I don't blame these players when they lose their games. I think that they're still learning the scheme. I think the players don't know the scheme. I can tell that they're making, errors. They're not playing at full speed. At Charlotte, they're not playing at full speed. I think they're thinking before the snap. They're thinking about their responsibilities and what the play call was. They don't necessarily know their responsibilities pre-snap because they're none of them are playing at the ability. If I go watch tape on some of these guys at their previous school, they play faster. They play more fluid. They're better. I also think, I'm excited to see what happens with Max Brown. If you guys didn't know, that's the Florida quarterback. I also think they have some players on this team that should be in the starting lineup, and they're not. What do you say when you think some of these guys should be starting and they're not? That's what's happening right now. They're still evaluating their talent and not doing it correctly. They're still trying to figure out their players, and it's not working out. Isaiah Myers is going to be a starter, y'all. Isaiah Myers is 6'5" and a beast of a wide receiver, and I don't understand what this is. I don't know if our lads hasn't updated themselves. Jack Hester is not even here. He transferred to Utah State, I think. Yeah, he transferred to Utah State. So it's just crazy. But that dude right there is a stud. Hashawn Wilson, you didn't see him rush for almost 300 yards last year in one game. Should be the starting running back. There's just stuff here that bugs me all around on Charlotte. I think it's a shit show. Defensive line, Clowney intrigues me the most. Out of everybody, Clowney intrigues me the most. So, didn't mean to ignore your question. It's just when I watch tape, that's what intrigues me the most. Defensive line at Memphis. Memphis is supposed to have a really good team this year. It's supposed to be great. I won't go into all the details on that. I can just tell you that I really like Memphis's offense and what they're capable of. Defensive line-wise, a lot to be desired. They need to address it. I'm excited to see Devin Baldwin here. This is a Jacksonville State kid transferred in. It's cool. I saw that they picked up some players. They're missing the kid from Man, what's wrong with me? Kid from Tennessee, transfer, linebacker, led them in tackles. They're missing him. Javonte Mackey, I forgot his name. That's fucking crazy. Javonte Mackey coming in from Arkansas State, I think. Man, I can't. Yes, Arkansas State. Good player. Good player. Good on tape. They need to improve immensely. I was not impressed with their defensive line. It's not good. Hope it plays better this year. I really do. Patrick Lucas coming in, congrats. But I hope they play better. Spears played a lot of football, and it didn't look good on tape. A lot of first downs being given up. You got Navy right here. Let me tell you about Navy's defensive line. Sneaky good. Obviously, the service academies can't use any transfers. They can only use what they recruit. It's just the way it is because they're out here trying to create officers for the military. So you can leave, but you can't show up through the transfer portal. They get about 40 new recruits every year. They also have a prep school for their redshirting because they're not allowed to redshirt while they're in school. The military, bro. They're getting ready. They're producing officers. These defensive linemen are good. Go watch the tape. All of them. You go watch the tape, you're going to see 94, 96, 98. All these guys are good. And they got another year. Okay? I'm telling you, they're good. Whiteside's good. Robinson's good. Reed is good. I got no problem. I actually think in the American Conference, they could have the best defensive line. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Yeah, I think Navy has the best defensive line in the American Conference. Colgate? Oh, snap. Colgate, baby. That's me. Shout out to me. I just know what I'm doing. So, Coleman Coco, transfer from Colgate. Very good player on tape. Always active. Good hands. Good size. I like him a lot. Popped on tape for me when I watched him play. 44. Popped on tape. Good player. South Florida, like their whole defensive line. I like them all. I like Blue Eli, Vaughn, Cheney. I like all these dudes right here. Good guys. Like them all. And yes, they're all transfers, but they're also older. Like they've been around for a while. Physically developed players. I haven't seen anybody come up that was like a freshman that they're recruiting and stuff. And I'm sure they're trying to figure that out. Shout out to Alex Golish. But for me, their defensive line is probably the strength of their defense for me. I like them. Good players. Quality dudes. Some trench dudes. Tulane. We're going to find out how accurate this chart is. I don't think it is. But, dude, Patrick Jenkins can play football. He's a great defensive tackle. Angela's a little undersized for me. Hicks can play. I like their defensive line. I like Troy's defensive line, so something's gonna give here. John Summerall coming over from Troy, head coach. I think Tulane's defensive line is going to be pretty decent. I like their players. Once again, you got to go watch tape. UTSA is going to be struggling. No more Trey Moore, but right. So they had a guy with 14 sacks in Trey Moore, and he just left for Texas, and he's the best player on Texas. They had the best player. I'm telling you, they got other studs here though. They've been playing for a while. All these guys, seniors, junior, seniors, junior, like all these guys have been around. I go watch the tape. I saw some pretty good players. I think UTSA is a cut above the rest of the group of 5 teams when it comes to getting players from the junior college ranks, from the transfer portal, from anywhere. I just think they get a little bit better caliber player. So I really like what they're doing and how they're doing it. Shout out to them. I'm excited. I think their offense is going to be right? Kavorian Barnes is one of the very best running backs in the group of 5. One of the very best. And the fact that Robert Henry's still here is crazy. Rocco Griffin, they have a 3-headed monster. They have a 3-headed monster at running back. 3 amazing running backs. I think that hinders your ability to get a bunch of sacks and be productive, but it keeps your defensive line fresh because they're just going to keep getting first downs and give your defense rest. When you have a pass-first offense, your defensive line gets no rest. This is why USC was getting scored on like crazy. This is why LSU was getting scored on like crazy because their offense was scoring too fast and defense got no rest. You need to slow it down a little bit, be a little bit more balanced. Shout out to Michigan. Be a little bit more balanced, and then your defense will be rested, and you'll get more production out of them. If you throw it too much, and you're giving 3 and outs, and you're punting, and you get these guys back on the field over and over, they're going to get blown the hell out, and then teams don't have to pass anymore because they got the lead on you. Now they just run, and now your whole defensive line just looks like they get no production. There's a whole lot to that, but Trey Moore was the guy, man, and they're missing. It's a shame, but they're missing Trey Moore. They're going to miss him. I like the players they have. I think they're very senior laden. I think it's very, very respectable. in the American. People need to pay attention. UTSA, let me think. Probably top 3 on the defensive line in the conference. So I really like them. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about defensive line. I'll go back and I'll do chat one last time, and then we'll be good from there, and then we'll call it a day. So, does USF have the depth at D-line to have a breakout year in the AAC? A breakout year is possible, right? But not. I wouldn't say a breakout year. Like, I don't know what you consider a breakout year. I thought last year was a breakout year. Making it to a bowl game after having a 1-11 season was a breakout game to me. You know, everybody always talks about these 1-11 season teams. South Florida had a 1-11 season, fired their coach, and they played great against Gaulish. Northwestern, same thing, 1-11 season, won 8 games last year. The only team that went 1-11 that's pretending to have a good season was Colorado. And they won 4 games and beat no teams with a winning record. So it's just like South Florida's good, man. They're building. They're doing everything they can. I don't think their defensive line impacts their win-loss record at South Florida. No. I think they need Naquan Wright to play amazing. I think they need their defensive backs to play good. Yeah, don't get beat deep and let Byron Brown do his thing. But they're going to score points. South Florida's going to score points. They're going to cover spreads and be in games that they shouldn't be in because of Byron Brown. So I hope it works out for them. Why are you such a Colorado fan? Definitely not a Colorado fan. I'm not a fan of any team. Let me make this very clear. I support players. I support coaches. I don't give a shit what team they're on, if that makes sense. So, like, these players and these coaches can can transfer to a different team, and then I'll like them accordingly, right? So if you're a player and you play at a particular team, I'm not a fan of that team at all. I'm a fan of players and coaches. I don't care where they're at. I don't care what color jersey you wear. I'm not a fan of thread. Or if you're a fan of thread in a different tint and a different color, meaning like a jersey, or you have a favorite color in jersey, like that's what you're a fan of, that's on you. I'm a fan of the person in the jersey, the person. And wherever that person goes, I still support them. So I'm not a fan of Colorado by any means because I have no affiliation to Colorado. I'm not an alumni. I didn't grow up there. I'm not a fan of any team. I want to make that clear. I'm a fan of players. I support players. Now, that being said, some players I'm not a fan of. Some players break the law. Some players have character concerns. Some players are a detriment to their own team's success. Some coaches are equivalent. Some coaches make terrible decisions. They lie to players. They do things. So I'm not a fan of those coaches or those players. That can change from week to week. You can be in love with your girlfriend, but then she can go out and cheat on you, do you dirty. You still love her? No, right? So if somebody goes out there and does something unethical or immoral, you don't still have to support them. So sometimes some people will be like, Rico, you used to rock with so-and-so so much. And then you can be like, well, yeah, I thought very highly of an individual, and I don't anymore. Because every assessment is fluid. You know, you can say a player is great, and then years can go by, and you can sit down and reassess and be like, no, that player's not great. And people will look at you and go, oh, you said so-and-so's great. Yeah, bro. And then I watched the next 10 games and made a reassessment. You know, what you say about a player when they're a freshman isn't the truth. It isn't the law. It isn't accurate. It isn't the way it's going to be moving forward. You can say a guy is great, and then as the seasons keep going and going and going, you can go, well, he's injury prone and a bust. You can always adjust your assessment. It's always fluid. It's in real time. I'm not a fan of Colorado. I'm an assessor of talent and the transfer portal. Last offseason, it just so happens Colorado used the transfer portal more than any other team. That's all it was. And it was me knowing the players in the portal, which is what I do. I study every player in the transfer portal. So it was the fact that I knew every player on Colorado made you think I was a fan of Colorado. I'm not. This year, I'm an advocate for Indiana and UTEP. You know why? They got new head coaches, and they use the transfer portal more than everybody else. So I'm an advocate for those teams. I believe in those two teams. I'm not talking about the jerseys. I'm talking about the players in those jerseys. I believe in the players that transfer to those schools. So I think you guys misunderstand how sports coverage works because you're so used to fandom. If you want fandom, Go to one of these pages that has been created for clicks. Go to one of these pages who specifically covers your favorite team, like Alabama, huddle, whatever they fucking call it. Welcome to the Clemson cave, and we only talk about Clemson today. It's like, I don't care for that. That's not for me, bro. I'll be making a podcast tomorrow about the Big Ten. And I'll be talking about every single team in the Big Ten just like I did today for the ACC. That's my thing, is I talk about 134 teams, and I know 134 teams better than anyone in this world. If you can find one individual that wants to go bar for bar with me on all the teams, I would love to meet that guy. I wish him well. I hope he's been studying for 20 hours a day. And I hope he retained it all, because I'm ready. There's nobody like me. I'm one of a kind. That's why I'm RicoKnows. That's why this exists. It's not because RicoKnows, blah, blah, blah. It's not because I got some sponsorship ad behind me. It's because of the authenticity of actually putting in the work and then retaining it and applying it in a concise, captivating manner that people want to see. That's it. You can tell everybody who the 10 leading rushers are in the history of the NFL. And then I can tell everybody who the 10 leading rushers are in the history of the NFL. And the only difference is people are going to watch me say it more than you. And that's talent. And that's the point, right? I'm going to provide context, history, fun facts, things you didn't know, talk about the 5 guys who didn't make the list. Like, I'm just on a different level in that regard. It's kind of how it goes. Just joined starting for the beginning. Did you ever find out how many times Shador was actually hit versus ran out of bounds? I remember you saying that rule last season. Yeah, TD Florida, it was 7 times. 7 times. I had it on 7 different times in the games. I actually posted 2 of them. I think I posted 2 of them, but there was 5 more. So 7 total. 7 too many. What's up, TD Florida? Thank you for being here, though. Hey, guys, I'm wrapping up the show. We got stuff going on in our life over here. Kim and I do. I apologize. You guys have a blessed day. Thank you for joining me. I apologize. I'm supposed to have this up and ready to go. Sometimes I'm failing at life, y'all. I don't think I'm failing at life. I'm just failing at certain things because I'm doing my own production, my own thing, all at the same time. My girl knows. My girl knows. And as long as Kim knows, well, nothing else matters. What up, sweetie? She's like, what are you talking about, bro? Thanks for being here, guys. Please watch the video from the beginning if you got in late. Your friends don't know, but Rico knows. Peace, y'all.
Oh, you make me wanna talk back to you. Say it like that. If I hate you, then find someone